Hello, this is cricket. It's the second most popular sport in the world. Only association football, or soccer, has more fans than cricket. When I was a schoolboy, back in the days when everything was in black and white, I, like millions of other boys in many countries, had to learn how to play cricket during the summer months. Naturally, summer in England is a relative term. One of my earliest memories of learning cricket was at secondary school when Mr. Nash entered my life. Mr. Nash had been a sergeant in one of the Jamaican regiments during the Second World War, and after the war he had married an English woman and remained in the UK. Like many other ex-sergeants, he ended up as a physical education teacher in the school system, and I have to say this was not a bad arrangement. However, coming from the Caribbean meant that Mr. Nash had a passion for cricket. He called it God's game. As you can imagine, we boys had to conform to his vision of the sporting world. This meant a lot of time playing cricket. On one occasion, I did ask Mr. Nash why he thought cricket was so important, and he said, "Boy," I'm not going to try and do the accent, I'm useless at accents. "Boy," he said, "cricket is important because it teaches you everything about life. It teaches you patience, teamwork, how to interpret your enemy's thoughts, in other words, psychology, physical resistance. It teaches you how to deal with emergencies. For this reason, it's a great preparation for war. It also helps you deal with panic, boredom, and pain." This last point was telling because, don't forget, the cricket ball is very hard, and when it hits you at a high speed, you do not forget the experience. I was once knocked unconscious by a cricket ball. There were no helmets in those days. It was my own fault. I should never have volunteered to be a wicket keeper. So, like it or not, cricket teaches you about life. So why does it exist? Where does it come from? And why is it the second most popular sport in the world? And perhaps most important of all, what are the rules? I ask this because it's not easy to understand. It takes a long time to understand what is happening. Whatever is happening also takes a long time. International games can last 3 days. Even local games can last an entire afternoon. And it's one of the few games in the history of sport that has meal breaks. What is the mystery of cricket? Well, let's find out. One of the earliest references to cricket was in 1300 and concerns the future King Edward II of England playing at Creag and other games in both Westminster and Newenden. It has been suggested that Creag was an Old English word for cricket, but others believe the word just meant games in general. It is possible that cricket survived as a children's game for many generations before it was increasingly taken up by adults around the beginning of the 17th century. Possibly, cricket was derived from bowls, an older sport where a batsman was introduced who tried to stop the ball from reaching its target by hitting it away. They played on sheep-grazed land or in clearings. No lawnmowers in those days. The original implements may have been a matted lump of sheep's wool or even a stone, or a small lump of wood as a ball, and a stick or a crook or another farm tool as a bat, and a stool or a tree stump or a gate, for example a wicket gate, as, you've guessed it, the wicket. In 1597, a court case in England concerning the ownership dispute about a plot of land in Guildford in Surrey mentions the game of cricket, and a 59-year-old John Derrick testified in the court case that he and his school friends had played cricket on the site 50 years earlier, when they attended a school nearby. Derrick's account proves beyond reasonable doubt that the game was being played in Surrey at around 1550, and is the earliest generally accepted reference to the game. The first reference to cricket being played as an adult sport was in 1611, when 2 men in Sussex were prosecuted for playing cricket on Sunday instead of going to church. In the same year, a dictionary defined cricket as a boys' game, and this suggested that adult participation was a recent development. During the 17th century, cricket began to gain popularity among adults. This was probably interrupted after the Civil War and the parliamentarian rule, when many games and sports were banned. Although cricket is not specifically mentioned, it's certain to have been banned as well. After the restoration of the monarchy, all sports became more popular, and by the end of the century, cricket was being played in villages and towns across England. In the 1700s, cricket became more organised, with formal clubs being established. The laws of cricket were codified in 1744, and in 1787 the Marylebone Cricket Club, the MCC, was founded at Lord's Cricket Ground in London, or at least near London at the time, and has been the sport's main lawgiver ever since. With the expansion of the British Empire, cricket spread to British colonies, with matches being played in India, Australia, the West Indies, New Zealand and South Africa, among many others. The first international match was played in 1844 between Canada and the United States, neither of which are famous cricketing nations these days. In 1877, the first Test match was held between England and Australia, establishing the tradition of international competition. In international competitions to this day, the strongest cricketing nations were previously British territories. Countries like India, Australia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, South Africa and the West Indies. The West Indies team is made up of players from 10 Caribbean countries. You can see them here. The West Indies has traditionally been one of the strongest teams in the world, and Mr. Nash, my sports teacher at school, was originally from Jamaica. It was mainly during the 19th century that cricket developed into the game that we would recognise today, in particular the fast overarm bowling of hard cricket balls, which made protective gear a real necessity, but there were naturally many other changes. In the 20th and 21st centuries, cricket developed enormously, both as an international sport and as a professional sport in the main cricketing countries. Many people who don't come from cricketing countries are surprised to learn that cricket is the second most popular sport in the world. I am from a cricketing nation, England, where even people who are not very interested in the game have some knowledge of it. For many years, I have lived in a non-cricketing nation, Italy, where the majority of the people have absolutely no knowledge of the game and are totally confused if they happen to see one in progress. So for the benefit of people from the latter category, here is a simple explanation of what happens on a cricket pitch. This is an overview of the key rules and components of the game, and I apologise in advance to cricket fans who will find this obviously oversimplified. But anyway, here goes. Oh, by the way, I've put a link to an excellent video on the rules of cricket in the description below. There are two teams, each consisting of 11 players. One team bats and has 2 players on the field at any one time. The other bowls and fields and has 11 players on the field. The batting team aims to score as many runs as possible. I'll go into the ways they can score runs in a minute. The bowling fielding team aims to restrict the runs and dismiss the batsman. When a batsman is dismissed or out, he is replaced by another member of the batting team. All 11 members of the batting team can bat, but sometimes the batting team will declare before all the team have batted. But the ways to score runs: running between the wickets. A batsman runs between the 2 sets of stumps, scoring 1 run each. Boundaries: 4 runs if the ball hits the boundary, and 6 runs if the ball clears the boundary without touching the ground. Here are the most common ways a batsman can be declared out. Bowled out: the ball hits the stumps and dislodges the bails. Caught out: the ball is caught by a fielder before it has touched the ground. LBW, leg before wicket: the ball hits the batsman's leg in line with the stumps because the batsman's leg is blocking the view of the stumps. Run out: a fielder hits the stumps with the ball while the batsmen are running and not at the wickets. Stumped: the wicketkeeper hits the stumps with the ball while the batsman is out of the crease, the safe area, and is not attempting to run. What is an innings? An innings ends when 10 of the 11 batsmen are out, and the set number of overs are bowled, or the batting team decides to stop at that score. Oh, by the way, what is an over? An over is when 6 legal balls have been bowled. After each over, a new bowler will bowl for the next over at the other end. I'm starting to understand that the more things I explain, the more questions come to mind. Welcome to cricket. What about the length of each game? Here there are three most common formats. There are Test matches, the main international games, up to 5 days, 2 innings per team. One-day internationals, 50 overs per team. And T20, 20 overs per team. This is the most common form of league cricket, and this type of game can last for about 3 or to 3.5 hours, very short by cricket standards. One thing is very clear to me: if anybody who has never seen a game of football before watches a football match, he or she will probably have a reasonable idea about the rules in a relatively short time. The simplicity of the rules and the potential complexity of the game is said by many to be the secret of football's success. If someone has never seen a cricket match before and watches a game, it'll take a lot longer and probably a lot of questions for most people to have any idea about what is going on. The rules are complicated and the game is even more complex. So what is the appeal to so many nations around the world of cricket? To be honest, I'm not a great fan of cricket, but as it's part of my country's culture, I'm glad that it is there, and I feel a certain degree of affection for this quirky, complex game. However, I have no desire to repeat my school days experience by actually playing it. Many people have written about the appeal of cricket. I can only say that I think Mr. Nash, my ex-games teacher, was probably right. Cricket contains physical and psychological demands, excitement, panic, and boredom. The high speed and hardness of the ball can make it quite dangerous. It even contains meal breaks. It's a bit like life, really. Bye for now.